why this contribution, this focus on ancestry can help us so much. Part of the reason why so many people are depressed, part of the reason why so many people are overwhelmed, part of the reason why so many people struggle with anxiety is because, well, they feel alone, right? And this society that we live in, cultivates this idea of individualism, of, well, you could be strong. Oh, you could figure it out on your own. And you should, in fact, figure it out on your own. You can do it all by yourself, these concepts of self-reliance, which has its place. But what happens is that what ends up happening is people end up feeling like they're all alone, that everything is up to them. And that is not true at all, right? And so the benefit of our ancestral worldview is it allows us to tap into the notion of, no, we are part of a team. It's not, I don't have to figure it all out because I'm part of a team, I'm part of a collective. I'm not the wave, I'm part of the wave, I'm not the ocean, I'm part of the ocean. And so we're able to tap into a wider body of spiritual support. And just knowing that we're not alone, that we do have this team around us, can help someone, I feel, break closer out of the depression and the anxiety and the overwhelm that they're facing. And just, I want to share this. So on my own journey of understanding deeper the ancestors, I didn't grow up with the notion of ancestry like this. I grew up in the Caribbean, like I said, Roman Catholic Church. And so my whole notion growing up was, well, when we die, we die, and that's basically it. And so my first profound experience with ancestors happened actually here in San Francisco, which is about a half an hour away from Oakland, where I live. And what happened was, so even though I understood the concept of ancestry was just a concept for me, it was a concept, but it wasn't in my bones. And so what happened to me was one day, this famous medium from the United Kingdom was giving a demonstration in the city of San Francisco, and he was talking about mediumship. And near the end of that talk, he gave a demonstration. And towards the end of the demonstration, one of the things he did was he started talking to my son about this woman who wanted to talk to him. And the more he spoke, I realized that this woman was, in fact, my grandmother. The more details he gave, I realized, oh, this is my grandmother. And that was when it changed for me. That is when the whole concept of ancestors became in my bones. And I felt it for the first time, and since that time, I've had, many experiences with ancestors. So one of the things I want to share as we reflect on ancestors, and one of the things I hear often as I work with people, a lot of people feel like maybe they're not getting messages from their ancestors, or they don't feel as connected. And so one of the things I often say is, well, it's our birthright, it's our DNA. The connection is there. So it's more a question of determining how they are sending messages to you. So sometimes people come to me and they talk about, well, they're not dreaming. And what I say to them is, well, dream is only one vehicle. Dream is only one way in which ancestors may attempt to communicate. But some other common ways that they can communicate with us is just through our feelings. So I often encourage people to get in touch with their feelings. And one of the ways on my own journey in which ancestors work with me is through inspiration, inspired thought, right? What I've discovered is that there's really no way for you to repeatedly miss messages from your ancestors. Why is that so? Well, it's because it's their job to transmit these messages to us. And so if you miss it, so I often think of ancestry, the messages as a GPS system. If you're driving your car and you have your GPS on, if you miss your turn, the GPS will reroute you to another exit. If you miss that, guess what? Not to worry. They're going to reroute you a different way. If you miss that one, fine. The GPS will turn around and give you another set of directions. You miss that, another set of directions. It's the same thing on our spiritual journey. You know, what will happen is the ancestors will redirect us. So they may send you a message directly to you. If you don't get it, they'll send it again in a different way. And if you still don't get it, then they may send it through someone else, you know? And so as I work with people, one of the things I often suggest to them is to just pay attention to what messages coming in on a weekly basis. And maybe at the end of the week, try and determine, well, what was the theme of that week? What stood out? I promise you, the messages are always there. One of the things I want to touch on as we talk about ancestors, you know, who've gone on, I feel my position is it can be dangerous to try and label ancestors as good and bad, and I'll explain why. For a lot of reasons. Just like I am not exactly the same person I was 10 years ago, right? Or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. Neither is anyone in this session, right? The same is true of our ancestors. Just because they might have done something at some point in their life, it doesn't mean that they're the same person now. Why? It's because they're still living. They have a chance to evolve, change, transform. So as I work with people, what I often do is I ask them to, instead of try to handpick who they think is worthy of helping them, just to be open to who wants to help them, who wants to come and offer that support. And again, just because someone may have done something, it doesn't mean they can't guide us. It doesn't mean they can't guide us out of a bad relationship. Doesn't mean they can't guide us towards a job that's more fulfilling. It doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to guide. In the same way, but another analogy I can give you right now is about several years ago, I went to speak at a prison, Folsom Prison. So many Black and brown people in there for maybe crimes that they've done a long time ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Does that mean that those people who did those things 20 years ago have no value now to society? That because they did that, they can't educate someone else, that they have no wisdom to share? So that's one of the things I would, encourage others to think about, is just be open to who wants to share that wisdom in their lives. So again, as we look at the part of the African cosmological worldview, which would include ancestors and nature, I want to touch on, what else do our traditions have to offer? Well, healthcare, is the way of course expanding our healthcare beyond what the Western world wants to give us. And just knowing that, well, we have our own systems that we could turn on to support whatever it is that's being offered here as well. So as many of you know, in traditional Africa, people like myself who do divination work or other healers still provide healthcare for most of the population in many instances. So we touched on ancestors, touched on nature. I want to talk about purpose, and as these traditions,